Hey, welcome to our archive edition of Chad's Beer Podcast with me, Chad, of Chad's Beer Reviews, and my buddy Leo is right here. Maybe he'll say hi. Anyway, so this is the second ever interview with a craft beer enthusiast that I shot. This is with my friend Henry. If you're old school Chad's Beer Review, like all the way back to the days of this logo, maybe you have one of these T-shirts. Probably remember Henry. He started. We met like on MySpace, yeah, back in the MySpace days, and we had like so much in common. We lived close together. We had a lot of friends in common, and yeah, so he came over. We shot beer reviews, and then we would hang out at Mahar's like almost like every Thursday night, like clockwork. Unfortunately, Mahar's isn't there anymore. Yeah, so he was in. It's funny because we had this like almost like a ritual where he would come over like every Friday afternoon, and this is when I was still in college. I wasn't working full time then, and I believe he was unemployed then, but I can't 100% remember. But he would come over like every Friday afternoon. We would shoot like two back to back beer reviews, and yeah, that was a lot of fun. So you would have seen him in like at least once a week in 2010 and most of 2011. And then he got married and moved out of state. And, I hardly saw him again. And he did do one guest review almost like a year later. I think we did I'm a Gang, Three Philosophers in 2012, it might have been. And I haven't seen him in person since then. We still email basically because he's not on social media or anything. So maybe he's watching this. Henry, if you're watching this, I'd love to have you as a guest reviewer on the show because this is still chugging. Oh, by the way, now I finally have a beard because back then I was in the Navy Reserves and I actually couldn't have facial hair. Not that I really wanted it or anything. What I needed to do was lose weight back then, which I finally did. So I lost the weight and gained the beard. So I don't know if Henry thinks this is a thumbs up or down or what, but anyway, so this is actually a pretty short episode, which is why I'm kind of padding this intro. I thought we went like a half hour or so, but we only went about 15 minutes. But maybe I can get him back and we can do, a re-podcast. I was going to say re-review, but that doesn't make sense. All right, so I'm rambling. Please enjoy this old school 2010 podcast with my friend Henry. Hey, welcome to another interview with a craft beer enthusiast. I'm interviewing Henry today. I wouldn't, and you probably wouldn't call yourself a critic, but I would call you an enthusiast.
Right, I'm an enthusiast. I'm a guest critic periodically on your show.
Right.
I like beer. I do not claim to be an expert, but I certainly enjoy it, and I've had enough experience to where I try to know Shinola from the other stuff.
Yeah, and the point of these interview series is to just kind of pick a person's brain as to just see where you're coming from. And then once I get enough of them, then we'll see where everybody's coming from. When did you first started drinking or...
Well, I first started stealing Grandpa's cough medicine as a child. Not a small child, but I did used to steal my dad's beer sometimes when I was a lot younger, which was Budweiser or whatever, crappy beer. And yeah, Budweiser's crappy. You can quote me on that. And over time I started trying new things. When I was maybe 16 years old, I subscribed to a mail order beer service called Ale in the Mail.
Really?
Because they don't card, and it's a national thing. You just sign up your stuff and you make the payment. I think I might have had a card of some kind. I think I was 17.
So you drank mostly for the buzz, right? Not because you liked the taste
right.
of
When I
it?
first started, yeah. And with something like Budweiser, I think that's kind of the name of the game. I don't know that many people who really enjoy the flavor of Bud. Other than to quench thirst from salty foods or something like that.
Right.
Maybe before Ale in the Mail, I think I really had my first good beer at age 16. I was drinking with some older friends of mine, older dudes who used to listen to heavy metal, drink beer. Some of those guys did drink Guinness. We were drinking the Guinness, probably the extra stout in those days. And then, I enjoyed that very much. I always preferred that to the Bud or, Miller or whatever else. And then one friend of mine presented me with a Samuel Smith's Tadcaster Porter. I was blown away. It was so good. You know, probably 16 or 17. Wow. And it was just phenomenal. I did not know that beer could have so much flavor and complexity. And still give me that buzz I was looking for as a young man.
So was that the turning point right there?
That was it. And I think Ale in the Mail was after that. And slowly but surely I explored more of the Samuel Smith's line of beers. You know, I think that the Oatmeal Stout became my favorite rapidly, although I did like the Winter Welcome, you know, the Nut Brown. But that was the beginning. Once I turned 21, and it was more easy for me to get beer anywhere. I mean, I had a beard and looked like an old guy anyway, so I was already going to beverage centers and just sort of buying beer for all my younger friends when I was not 21. But, you know, really 21 formed a sort of renaissance where I was just buying anything I could get my hands on that was different.
When did you start going to Mahar's?
Mahar's really marks the organized beer exploration. Before that, I was just sort of cavalier. I was drinking whatever I could find that was different or exciting. Not so much the expensive stuff or the Belgian stuff, but American microbrews, you know, stuff with cool names, whatever. I just liked variety. But then I started going to Mahar's when I was probably 24 or 25 years old. Maybe 25.
So what year was it?
2005,
okay.
I think. And, you know, I was going once a week with a group of people, and just, you know, I'd have between 2 and 4 beers a week. Every time it was a different beer. Mahar's has this wonderful beer tour where they keep track of everything you drink, and whenever you go in, you're handed a list of all the beers they have in stock which you have not had yet.
Right.
So you usually have a selection of maybe 100 beers, minus, you know, and that's discounting anything you might have had. Right now, I get at least 50 beers on my sheet when I go in.
Right.
And it's great. You know, you're not, no longer do I drink for a buzz. I mean, that kind of stopped in my early 20s.
Right. So you're drinking for the enjoyment now.
Yeah, I enjoy the flavor of beer. I enjoy the complexity of beer. I enjoy there's a beauty in beer. You know, the religious folks out there might understand this a little bit more, but in the same way that, you know, honey is a testament to creation.
Right. In
terms of the way that bees husband the flowers and they make the honey out of that, and you get a flavor snapshot of whatever the area is like. So beer is another sort of just amazing situation where grains and water, hops, yeast, natural little living things, are husbanded by us to turn those simple ingredients into such complex and flavorful beverages. It's amazing, and I am in awe at that wonder.
So you appreciate brewing as an art form,
absolutely,
not just as a commodity.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that...
Have you done any home brewing?
A little bit. I've dabbled. I've made a few beers. Nothing too spectacular.
Right.
One of these days when I have a little bit more cash and a little bit more space, I'll probably get more serious about it. So far, the favorite thing I ever made actually used honey, a product I'm a fan of and that I believe in. I made a sort of honey ale with local honey, and it was delicious.
What's some of like your more preferred styles? Like if you're,
okay.
I mean, like as you said, like when you go into Mahar's and you get a list of almost 100 different beers to choose from, what's most likely to attract your attention first?
Well, I always like stouts. Stouts are easy. They're hard to mess up, in my opinion, and they're delicious. But in terms of a favorite style, something that I will always go for, something that makes me excited, I really like English bitters. ESBs especially.
Right.
They're the kind of pale ale I look for. Unlike a lot of American pales, the hops are not extreme. They're also more malty, and I prefer a maltier beer. So that might be my favorite style.
Can we literally, scientifically, quantifiably measure the quality of beer?
No.
Or is it entirely personal preference, or is it somewhere in between?
Well, look, appreciating the art. You're raising weird epistemological issues here, and
You got a degree in philosophy, right? You should.
Well, I've studied a lot of philosophy, and certainly all taste is subjective.
Right.
But there's, if you want to gauge brewing, you can look at complexity. Oftentimes people ask, like, what's better about this? Or why are, astronauts better than cavemen? And stuff like that comes up. But, you can look at complexity.
Right.
And there are
when you say better or worse, is that you're implying that there's some kind of measurable value as opposed to I prefer this more.
Yeah, you'd have to make one. And you'd have to introduce some standard for comparison. And,
Right.
the reason I bring up the astronaut versus caveman thing is because, complexity is often used. We talk about technology. What's more, technologically better?
Right.
It's often the thing that is more complex, that can perform more functions, is more efficient. But when it comes to beer, there's a certain degree of complexity that is a good, judging factor.
Right.
If you look at a beer that has a complex flavor profile or aroma profile, there are lots of, you talk about subtle notes
Right.
often.
Right.
In fact, you talked about that might be your catchphrase a few weeks ago. But that's it though. You get a lot of different subtle notes, and they're together working in some kind of harmony with one another, forming an almost flavor or aroma symphony. That, to me, is good. And I look for that when I'm drinking beer.
Right. So, but to get into a kind of real world example here is, say you're at the supermarket or a regular bar or something, and, it's like the Joe Six-Pack type who says, oh, Bud Light is delicious, I can just throw that stuff down. I hate those dark beers, they're so heavy, they taste like a basket of potpourri. It's like, now do you actually say, no, this beer is actually better than that, or is it more of an argument at that point where it's like you can actually out-argue the other person as to why?
Well, I would say that it is an argument, and that I could out-argue them. But I mean, ultimately, if they don't like the other kind of beer,
Right.
You have to leave room for them to experience it, because it's very hard to say you don't like something that you don't understand.
Right.
And I often feel that in arguments on anything, politics or society or, anything.
Movies.
Sure. Oftentimes, the argument that I will try to make is based on them understanding. I want them to understand what I'm putting down.
Right.
And on beer, I feel the same way. If somebody wants to say, oh, I don't like those dark beers, I'll ask them, have you tried all of those dark beers?
Right.
Have you sat down and thought about it? Have you swished this around in your mouth and enjoyed the aroma of it? Or have you just had one sip once at a ball game?
Now, do you think that can taste really be measured? Because some people don't like chocolate. Some people don't like spicy foods.
Well, like I say, Chad, it's subjective.
Right.
So ultimately, getting back to that Joe Six-Pack guy, if that guy has really tried all these other beers, if this guy has had the aged old ale, he's tried the barley wine, he's tried the fancy Belgian ale, he's tried, whatever, all these other beers, and honestly, he likes Budweiser the best,
Right.
then subjectively, Budweiser is his best beer.
Right.
So certainly, taste is subjective. I just think that based on the commonality we share as human beings, we all have taste buds and we can smell things, that some beers are going to be better than others. We'll just come to a subjective agreement on it.
Now, do you rate on a curve? Like, I mean, you're not a full-time or even part-time beer critic like me and Jay. Is that we were having a discussion recently, whereas like a more of a pedestrian drinker-friendly style, like a Pilsner. If there's like a really great example of that style, would you grade on a curve and say, well, for this style, it's a really good beer, and therefore I'm gonna give it a higher rating than I would, because like Jay and I agree, we don't grade on a curve. We just say, yeah, for a Pilsner this is really good, but for a beer in general it's only this. Which school of thought would you go to? Would you grade overall or on a curve?
Well, we've been talking about this on Facebook, we've been talking about it on the YouTube comments.
But the people don't know that. So.
No, but I mean, this is something that has been an ongoing debate, and it's really tricky. If you're using a single number or a single letter, and you're grading all kinds of different beer with that single value, it gets difficult. So I take a sort of complex approach. I will base the beer on, how I rate it, on how much I enjoy it, how well I think it's crafted or brewed, and also I will compare it to what I've already had. Certainly.
Why are you such a beer enthusiast? Like, do you have an agenda? Or is there something you're hoping to accomplish by...
Has Jim Koch paid me off?
Just by virtue of the fact that you come on my show.
Probably summed this up earlier when I was expressing my awe at beer.
Right.
Just the sheer level of enjoyment and amazement that good beer brings me. And as a result, I like to share my thoughts on it. I like to share my experiences on it. And being a guest reviewer on your show gives me an excellent opportunity to do that.
Right.
So I do it.
Alright, well I think that about wraps it up. I just kind of wanted to see where Henry was coming from, like as far as his history, and like what's your criteria or rationale for how you judge a beer. And I think we got that. Is there anything else that you want to put out there? Did anything I missed, or?
No, only that I wish for all the people out there in the YouTube viewing audience to have an amount of it.
Thanks to Henry.
I'm not going to hold that against
agreeing to do this interview with me.
Glad to be here, Chad.
And thanks for watching. And this isn't the last. We'll try to interview more craft beer enthusiasts out there. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for being here. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.